The internet we use every day is just a small part of something much bigger. Beneath the surface lies the deep web, a hidden world that most people never think about. It's a place where people go to stay anonymous, where secrets are kept, and where things happen that most of us wouldn't believe. But it's not just about staying hidden. The deep web is also home to dangerous corners that no one should ever visit. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of one person who ignored the warnings, gave into their curiosity, and ventured too far into this shadowy world. What they found wasn't just strange or unsettling, it was horrifying. And the price they paid for their curiosity is something you'll never forget. This story comes from a deleted Reddit thread that has since disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of what once was. The story was shared by someone who went by the name Alex. For the sake of the tale, let's keep that name. Alex was a college student, someone who had a deep understanding of computers and the internet. Tech-savvy and confident in their skills, Alex believed they could handle anything the internet had to offer. They were well-versed in everything from coding to encryption, and nothing seemed beyond their reach. But little did Alex know, they were about to dive into a part of the internet where even the most experienced could get lost, and perhaps even pay a price for it. It all began one fateful night, a night that would change everything. Alex was in their dorm room, as usual, bored and looking for something new. They had explored every corner of the surface web, where most of us spend our time. Social media, news sites, videos, and endless memes. But something about the surface world felt too predictable, too tame. Alex wanted more. They were curious, as many tech enthusiasts are, about the darker side of the internet. The part of the web most people know little about, or simply don't dare to explore. That's when they stumbled upon something that, in hindsight, they should have avoided. The part of the internet Alex decided to venture into that night is known as the deep web. Now, let me explain what that is for those who may not be familiar with it. The deep web is a vast section of the internet that's hidden from search engines like Google. It's not something you can find by just typing words into a search bar. It's a place where anonymity reigns, where people can communicate and share information without being easily traced. But while there are many legitimate and harmless things hidden on the deep web, like academic databases, private documents, or medical journals, there's another side, a much darker one. The more Alex explored, the more they realized that the deep web is home to some truly dangerous and unsettling places. Beneath the surface, there are forums and chat rooms where people trade illegal goods, where dangerous ideas are spread, and where disturbing secrets are shared. Black markets for everything from drugs to weapons exist in this hidden world, along with forums dedicated to hacking, criminal activity, and all sorts of activities that would make most people's skin crawl. And then, there's the even darker side, the parts of the deep web that contain content and images too horrible to describe. It's these places that one should never stumble upon, because once you see them, they can't be unseen. For most people, just hearing about the deep web is enough to send a chill down their spine. It's an area of the internet where law enforcement often has trouble tracking, where anonymity is the rule, not the exception. And while not all parts of the deep web are dangerous, there are places within it that should never be visited. But Alex wasn't like most people. With their tech skills, they felt confident. They thought they could navigate the depths safely, avoid the dark corners, and perhaps discover something new, something hidden that others might not know about. But Alex was wrong. What started as a simple exploration, a search for something unknown, turned into a nightmare. One that began innocently enough, but soon spiraled into a terrifying experience that would leave them forever changed. Now, let's take a moment to talk about what Alex found that night. In the vastness of the deep web, there are countless forums, chat rooms, and links that promise to reveal hidden truths or secrets. Some are harmless, others dangerous, and some are just bizarre. But there's one thing that connects many of these sites. They lure you in with promises of knowledge or revelations, pushing you to explore deeper. It's this sense of curiosity that leads so many people down dangerous paths. For Alex, it started with a simple post on a forum. It wasn't much, just a link. But this link had a warning attached to it. Do not click this link. The comments section was filled with warnings from users who had either been there or heard about it. Some even claimed that clicking the link would lead to bad things, things that no one should know. But that only made Alex more curious. It was the classic allure of the unknown, the very thing that had led so many others down dangerous roads. And Alex, being the confident and curious person they were, couldn't resist. He clicked the link. At first, it seemed harmless. The page loaded slowly, a blank, black screen with a simple message in white text. Welcome. Do you want to see the truth? It was cryptic, unsettling, but not overtly threatening. But the moment Alex typed yes, they were taken deeper into the site. That was the moment the unease began. For those unfamiliar with the deep web, it's important to understand that once you go beyond the surface, the rules are different. The further you go, the more anonymous everything becomes. But this anonymity can be both freeing and terrifying. Alex was no longer sure who was on the other side of the screen, or what they were watching. The feeling of being watched crept in slowly at first, until it became overwhelming. What was once a simple curiosity turned into something far darker. This was the beginning of a descent, one that would lead Alex into a place they never should have gone. But by then, it was too late to turn back. They were already in too deep. This is just the start of Alex's journey into the deep web, one that would leave them scarred and, in some ways, unrecognizable to those who knew them. And the question that remains is, what happens when you dig too deep into the darkness of the internet? Alex was about to find out the hard way. One late night, as the glow of the computer screen illuminated his dark dorm room, Alex found himself scrolling through an underground forum, a place where like-minded people shared encrypted files, strange stories, and even rumors about the dark corners of the internet. His eyes darted from post to post, skimming to the comments, some nonsensical, others bizarre. But then something caught his attention, a post titled simply, "Do not click this link." It wasn't much to look at, just a link with a brief comment beneath it warning users not to click. But Alex, ever the curious one, couldn't resist. The warnings in the comments only fueled his interest. It's just a link, he thought. What's the worst that could happen? As Alex moved his mouse cursor over the link, he hesitated. He knew what he was doing was risky. A part of him understood the dangers of venturing into the unknown parts of the internet. But another part, the one that couldn't leave things unexplored, took over. With a deep breath, he clicked the link. The screen flickered for a moment. It took longer than usual to load, and Alex's fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to hit the escape key if something went wrong. But the screen eventually settled, revealing a black background, the kind of minimalist look that suggested anonymity, and, perhaps, danger. A small white cursor blinked at him, like an impatient eye waiting for him to make the next move. There was no logo, no clear design, just that unsettling black background, and a message that appeared on the screen. Welcome. Do you want to see the truth? Alex sat back in his chair, his heart rate quickening. What was this? What was he about to get into? His fingers rested on the keyboard, uncertain. This was a step into something far beyond the casual browsing he was used to. There was no turning back now. He typed yes, half expecting nothing to happen. Maybe it was just a weird, obscure website, an art project, a hoax, or some joke. But the moment he pressed enter, the screen began to change. The words disappeared, replaced by a series of numbers, strange symbols, and images that didn't make sense. The cursor blinked again, this time in rhythm with a faint hum that seemed to come from the depths of the page. Alex felt a chill creep up his spine. Something was wrong. He tried to close the browser, but the screen wouldn't budge. He clicked the X in the corner. Nothing. He pressed Alt plus F4 in a desperate attempt to exit, but still, the screen remained frozen. It was as if the page was controlling his computer now, not the other way around. The numbers on the screen began to shift, rearranging themselves in a sequence that made Alex feel uneasy. They weren't random. They were deliberate, but they didn't make sense to him. At the same time, Strange symbols began to appear in the background, symbols he couldn't recognize, ancient-looking characters that seemed to shimmer and distort the further he stared at them. Suddenly, a small window popped up on the screen, a chat box that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The message inside read, "Hello, Alex. We see you." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. How did they know his name? He hadn't typed it anywhere. He hadn't logged in, hadn't provided any personal information. Yet there it was in black and white. His name. Panic set in as the screen shifted again. This time, the chat box was filled with new messages. Messages that seemed to be responding to Alex's every thought. "What's your location?" the message asked. Alex didn't type it. He hadn't told anyone. Yet the message seemed to know. "You're in your dorm room, alone." His fingers trembled as he stared at the chat box. It was like the page was somehow watching him, sensing his movements, feeding off his fear. And then, something even more disturbing happened. The webcam light on his laptop flickered on. Alex froze. He hadn't turned the camera on, but there it was, the small green light next to the lens glowing brightly. Slowly, he turned his head to look at the webcam, his stomach sinking. His own reflection stared back at him from the screen, a faint image of himself caught in the dim light of his room. He hadn't expected it to show him. He hadn't given the website permission to access his camera. He rushed to cover the camera, but before he could, a new message popped up on the screen. "We're watching." The words hit him like a cold wave of fear. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He pushed his chair back from the desk, his mind racing. What was going on? Who was on the other side of the screen? How had they done this? As he glanced back at the screen, he noticed the strange numbers and symbols had rearranged themselves into a pattern that was almost too familiar. It was his full name, followed by a string of numbers that looked like coordinates. His phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. Alex reached for it, trembling. When he checked the screen, there was a message, just a single line. "Don't trust the screen." His fingers went cold as he realized the horrifying truth. The message wasn't from his friends. It wasn't a joke. It was coming from somewhere else. Someone else. Someone who had access to his phone, his webcam, his very life. This wasn't just an ordinary website. This was something much darker. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. And Alex had just stepped into it. As the minutes ticked by, the screen in front of him began to glitch, the images distorting further, the symbols twisting and shifting in impossible ways. Alex tried to close the laptop again, but it was useless. The power button wouldn't work. The escape route he'd hoped for was gone. The darkness was closing in, and what scared him more than anything was the feeling that this was only the beginning. As Alex sat frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen, the page seemed to come alive. The numbers and symbols twisted in ways that defied logic. Each time he blinked, the images on his screen shifted, becoming more distorted and cryptic. His heart was racing. Every instinct told him to close the laptop, to shut it down and walk away, but his hands felt glued to the keys. He couldn't look away. It was like the page had a hold on him, pulling him deeper into its depths. And then it happened. A live stream video began to load on the screen. The video was grainy and jittery, but there was something sinister about it. The image flickered for a moment before coming into focus. It was a dark, empty room, almost identical to Alex's own dorm room. The walls were bare, and the faint hum of static filled the background. But the chilling part wasn't the room. It was the numbers and symbols flashing across the screen. They were the same cryptic symbols from before, but now they were moving, swirling like they were alive. They weren't just on the screen anymore. They were coming out of it, as if the computer itself was trying to reach him. Alex's eyes widened in disbelief. How was this happening? The stream seemed to be playing his own life back at him. The room on the screen was his, but not in any way he could understand. It was as if someone had placed a camera in his room without his knowledge, watching every move he made. A chat box appeared next. its messages appearing one by one, like someone was typing in real time, responding to Alex's every action. The first message read, "Alex, we see you." His blood ran cold. There was no way anyone could have known he was sitting right there, in his dorm room, alone. But the message didn't stop. "We know what you're wearing," it continued. "We know where you are." Alex glanced down at his shirt. It was a simple graphic tee, nothing special. But how could they know that? He didn't remember typing anything that would have revealed his clothes or where he was. It was as though the screen itself was watching, learning, tracking every detail of his life. Before he could process what was happening, something even more terrifying occurred. Files began downloading onto his computer automatically, without any input from him. His screen flashed as the files appeared. Disturbing images of dark, blurry figures and unsettling scenes that looked like they belonged in a nightmare. Faces that Alex didn't recognize stared back at him, their eyes hollow and lifeless. He tried to delete them, but each time he hit the delete button, more files appeared, too many to get rid of. His fingers were shaking, his thoughts racing. What was going on? Who was behind this? How did they have access to his computer? The more he tried to fight it, the worse it became. Then, a sudden chill ran down his spine as the light on his webcam flickered on. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't turned it on. He hadn't even opened any apps that could use the webcam. Yet there it was, bright and glaring, shining directly into his face. The webcam was on, and Alex knew instantly that something was watching him. He glanced at the screen, his reflection now visible in the webcam feed. His own face stared back at him, but it was distorted, like the image was glitching in and out of focus. The video feed wasn't just showing his face. It was showing him in real time, as though someone was sitting on the other side of the screen, watching his every move. A new message appeared in the chat box, this time in all capital letters. "We're watching." The words echoed in his mind, repeating over and over like a chant. He felt his pulse racing, his chest tightening with fear. His instinct screamed at him to shut the laptop off, to run, to get away from the screen, but he couldn't move. His body felt paralyzed. Suddenly, the room around him seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an unseen presence. The lights above him flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. He could feel someone else in the room with him, though he couldn't see them. And then the message came again, this time more urgent. "You should have stopped. You can't escape." The word sent a wave of panic through Alex. He grabbed his laptop, trying to pull it away from the desk, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it were glued to the table, unwilling to move. He tried to power it off, but the screen refused to go black. The brightness only increased, blinding him with its harsh glow. The webcam light flickered once more, and this time, Alex saw something in the reflection. It was fleeting, just a glimpse, but it was enough to make his blood run cold. In the corner of the webcam feed, there was something moving, something dark and formless, shifting just out of sight. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was like a shadow, a figure that shouldn't have been there, lingering just beyond the edges of the screen. His hands trembled as he backed away from the computer. The messages kept coming faster and faster, like they were closing in on him. His own name, his location, even his deepest fears were typed out in front of him, as though someone was pulling the thoughts right from his mind. There was no escape, no way out, and just as Alex thought he might lose his mind from the terror, a final message appeared on the screen, sending a chill through his entire body. "Too late. You can't escape. We know everything." The screen flickered one last time, and then everything went dark. Alex sat there, motionless, his mind reeling from the horrors he had just witnessed. The presence in the room seemed to be gone, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. He wanted to scream, to tell someone to run, but he couldn't. The laptop had become a door into a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. It was only just beginning. Suddenly, a sound broke through the silence of the room, a faint tapping, like a branch scraping against the window. But the tapping grew louder, and it wasn't just the wind. It was something else. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the noise grew more distinct. The eerie scratching coming from outside, just beyond his window. It wasn't a natural sound. It felt wrong. Something was trying to get in, or worse, something was already inside. He stood up, his legs trembling, and moved toward the window, peeking out into the darkness. But there was nothing, no movement, no sign of anyone. The campus was quiet, too quiet. Yet the scraping sound continued, a steady rhythm that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. It felt like the walls of his room were closing in around him, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. He turned back to the computer, praying for the nightmare to end, hoping that maybe it was all just a terrible glitch. But when his eyes met the screen, his blood ran cold. The distorted voice began to play, a loop that seemed to echo in the very core of his being. "You shouldn't have looked," the voice whispered, its tone warped and unrecognizable, like it was coming from a deep, unnatural place. "You shouldn't have looked," it repeated over and over, like a broken record. The voice distorted with every loop, the sound warping into something unearthly, sending chills up his spine. It felt like the voice was inside his head, taunting him, mocking his fear. Alex tried to look away, to shut his eyes, but the words kept coming. His hands were shaking as he fumbled for the power button on the laptop, desperate to turn it off. His fingers slipped over the keys in his panic, but no matter what he pressed, the screen wouldn't go black. Then, the lights in his dorm room flickered. Alex stumbled back, his mind racing. The flickering grew more intense, like the power was struggling to stay on. Each flash of light seemed to pulse in time with the distorted voice, the room growing darker and colder with each flicker. The shadows around him stretched and twisted, like something was trying to reach out from the corners of the room. He couldn't take it anymore. His body screamed for escape. He lunged for the power cord, pulling it out of the wall with all his strength. But the laptop didn't turn off. Instead, the screen brightened, the light blinding him for a moment. It didn't matter that the power was unplugged. The machine remained on. The image on the screen burned brighter, the message glowing with an otherworldly intensity. "There's no escape." The words appeared in bold, glaring letters, pulsating like they were alive. It wasn't just a message anymore. It was a declaration, a warning that no matter what Alex did, there was no way out. No matter how hard he tried, he was trapped in this nightmare. He backed away from the screen, his breath shallow, his mind spinning. The room around him felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing tighter and tighter as the message on the screen burned into his retinas. Suddenly, the sound of the distorted voice changed. It grew louder, more forceful. The voice no longer a whisper but a scream. "You can't escape. You should have listened. You should have never come here." The voice was everywhere now, reverberating through the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It wasn't just coming from the laptop. It was coming from the very air around him, seeping into his ears, into his mind. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the panic rising like a tidal wave. He could feel the presence in the room with him, closing in, suffocating him. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs wouldn't move. His mind was frozen, trapped in the terror of what was happening. The lights flickered again, this time with such intensity that the entire room seemed to tremble. The noise outside the window stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The tapping had ceased, but the sense of something watching him, of something lurking just out of sight, was overwhelming. The message on the screen flickered once more. Too late, Alex's chest tightened. He tried to scream, but no sound came. His body was frozen, paralyzed by fear. He had reached the breaking point. There was no escape, no way out. He felt as if he were being drawn into the screen, pulled into the darkness behind it. The room was no longer his. The walls, the floor, The very air felt foreign, as if he were trapped in a nightmare from which he could never awaken. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the screen went black. But Alex wasn't sure if he could even believe what he had just seen. Was it real? Was it all in his mind? The silence in the room felt suffocating, like a vacuum had sucked out all the air, leaving him alone in the darkness with his thoughts, his fear, and the haunting feeling that he would never truly escape. The aftermath. The next morning, Alex's roommate, Mark, woke up to a strange silence in their dorm room. It wasn't like Alex at all to sleep in late, especially with finals around the corner. He knocked on Alex's door, but there was no answer. Mark's curiosity turned to concern as he entered the room, calling out for Alex. What he saw made his stomach twist in disbelief. The room was eerily still. No sign of Alex anywhere, no backpack, no shoes, nothing. Just an unsettling emptiness hanging in the air. Mark's eyes scanned the room, and that's when he saw it. The laptop. It was lying on the floor, smashed into pieces as if something or someone had violently destroyed it. The once sleek and functional device was now just a heap of broken plastic and shattered glass. It looked as though it had been torn apart with force, its screen cracked and the keyboard barely recognizable. But there was something even more unsettling. Mark's gaze was drawn to the wall next to the desk, where a few words were written in what appeared to be Alex's handwriting. The letters were scrawled hastily, almost as if Alex had written them in a state of panic. Too deep. Mark froze. The words were cold, final, like a warning. It made no sense. Alex had always been careful when it came to his tech skills. He knew the dangers of the deep web, and yet, whatever had happened here was beyond anything Mark could comprehend. Desperate to make sense of the situation, Mark started searching the room for clues. He looked through Alex's belongings, hoping for some kind of explanation, but everything seemed out of place. His phone was gone, and so were all of his personal items. It was like Alex had vanished into thin air. By the time campus security arrived, there was still no sign of Alex. They questioned Mark and searched the room, but they found nothing to explain the disappearance. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. The only clue, besides the broken laptop and the cryptic message on the wall, was a strange feeling that something far more sinister was at play. Rumors quickly spread around campus. Some said Alex had gone into hiding, overwhelmed by the pressures of school. Others whispered that he'd become obsessed with the deep web and had lost touch with reality. But the most chilling theory, the one that seemed to gain traction among the students, was that Alex had uncovered something he wasn't supposed to see, something from the darkest corners of the deep web. To this day, no one knows what happened to Alex. Some believe he fell victim to the dangers lurking in that hidden part of the internet, lost forever to the secrets it holds. Some say that once you venture too deep, there's no way back. That once you're on the radar of the deep web's most dangerous users, you become a target, and there's no escaping the consequences. What's even more unsettling is the possibility that Alex's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. Stories like his have surfaced in whispers and online forums. Accounts of people who got too close to the truth, who dug too deep into the mysteries of the dark web and paid the price. If you're tempted to explore, remember this. Curiosity killed the cat, and sometimes the user. What do you think happened to Alex? Do you believe the deep web holds secrets that should never be uncovered? Or do you think something else was at play here? Have you heard similar stories? Or maybe experienced something unsettling yourself? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a spine-tingling story. Who knows? The next one might hit a little too close to home,